Joseph from the pit to the palace. What the enemy meant for evil, God turned it for good. A young man, Joseph, walks across the fields with his colorful robe flowing behind him. Joseph was 17, a dreamer boy, who saw visions of the future, but his gift made him a target. One morning he rushed to the breakfast table, eyes shining. "Brothers, I had a dream," he said, excited. "We were in the field, tying bundles of grain, and my bundle stood tall while yours bowed before mine." Silence, then laughter cold, mocking. "So you think you'll rule over us?" His eldest brother, Reuben, scoffed. Days later, another dream came. The sun, the moon, and 11 stars bowed before me. His father, Jacob, frowned. "Are you saying even your mother-in-law will bow to you?" Joseph didn't understand. He was just sharing what he saw. But his brothers? They were done with him. One afternoon, Jacob sent Joseph to check on his brothers, who were far away tending sheep. As Joseph approached, his brothers saw him in the distance. "Here comes the dreamer," Simeon sneered. "Let's kill him." Reuben hesitated. "No, let's not shed blood. Let's throw him into that pit and leave him there." Joseph arrived, smiling. "Brothers, Father sent me to—" Before he could finish, hands grabbed him. His coat was ripped from him. His pleas fell on deaf ears. They shoved him into a deep pit. "Please don't do this," his voice echoed. But his brothers sat down and ate their lunch as if nothing had happened. Then in the distance, dust, voices, camels. A group of traders passed by, heading to Egypt. Judah had an idea. "Why kill him when we can sell him?" For 20 pieces of silver. Joseph was pulled from the pit, bound in ropes, and led away. He turned one last time, looking at his brothers with tear-filled eyes. But they looked away. Joseph arrived in Egypt as a slave. He was SD to Potiphar, a powerful officer in Pharaoh's court. But even in chains, Joseph worked with excellence. He was different, favored. "Joseph, I trust you with everything I own," he declared. And just like that, Joseph was in charge of Potiphar's entire household. But temptation was waiting for him. Potiphar's wife noticed Joseph. "Joseph, come lie with me," she whispered one day. Joseph stepped back. "My master trusts me, and more importantly, I won't sin against God." But one day she grabbed his robe, demanding he stay. Joseph fled, but she screamed, accusing him falsely. That night, Potiphar returned home, furious. "Joseph, how dare you?" No trial, no defense. He commands to chains him. And Joseph was thrown into prison. Days turned to weeks, then months, then years. But even in prison, Joseph shined. The warden trusted him, making him oversee the other prisoners. One day, 2 high-ranking officials were thrown into prison. The king's cupbearer and baker. They both had troubling dreams. "Tell me your dreams," Joseph offered. The cupbearer went first. "I saw a vine with 3 branches. It blossomed into grapes, and I squeezed them into Pharaoh's cup." Joseph smiled. "In 3 days, Pharaoh will restore you." The baker hesitated, then spoke. "I had 3 baskets of bread on my head, and birds ate from them." Joseph sighed. "In 3 days, Pharaoh will execute you." 3 days later, it happened exactly as Joseph said. Before the cupbearer left, Joseph pleaded, "Please remember me when you see Pharaoh." But the cupbearer forgot. 2 years passed, from prisoner to prime minister. One night, Pharaoh had a disturbing dream. 7 fat cows swallowed by 7 thin cows. 7 healthy heads of grain, swallowed by shriveled ones. No one could interpret it. Then the cupbearer remembered. "There's a Hebrew man in prison. He can interpret dreams." Joseph was rushed from his cell, cleaned, and brought before Pharaoh. "I hear you can interpret dreams," Pharaoh said. Joseph replied, "I cannot, but God can." Pharaoh explained his dreams. Joseph listened, then spoke. Both dreams mean the same thing. 7 years of plenty are coming, followed by 7 years of famine. "Find a wise man to store food before the famine hits." Pharaoh looked at Joseph. "Who is wiser than you?" "I make you second in command of Egypt." From prisoner to ruler, Joseph was given a royal robe, a new name, and a ring of authority. Joseph got face to face with his brothers. The famine struck, and people from all nations came to Egypt for food. Among them were Joseph's brothers. They bowed before him, not recognizing him. Joseph's heart ached. This was the dream come true, but he needed to test them if they had changed. He accused them of being spies, kept one of their brother hostage, and demanded they return with their youngest brother Benjamin. When they did, Joseph saw something. They protected Benjamin. They had changed. Joseph couldn't hold back any longer. "I am Joseph, your brother." Silence in the room. Terror filled their faces and were so afraid. "Do not be afraid. What you meant for evil, God turned it for good to save many lives." Tears fell. Joseph embraced them. He forgave them completely. Jacob was brought to Egypt. The family was reunited. Years later, as Joseph looked back, he understood. The betrayal, the prison, and the waiting, it was all part of God's plan. "God sent me ahead to preserve life," he said. Joseph's story isn't just about suffering, it's about purpose. When life feels unfair, when doors close, when people betray you, remember God is working behind the scenes. What the enemy meant for evil, God will turn it around for good, even in the presence of your haters and family. If you believe, type Amen in the comments.